What's up, YouTube? This your boy, Silver Wolf of Silver Wolf TV. How everybody doing? Hope everybody's cool. I'm cool. Hope everybody had a blessed Thanksgiving. Before we get started, remember, God first and God able. And that first can be whatever you want it to mean with God. Now, before we get right into it, I'm going to give you some raw footage, a live interview with a legend on the streets of Baltimore City, OG Frank Nitty. We can go ahead and get right into it now with no further delay.
What it is, OG Frank Nitty, OG known for Park Heights, and I'm just coming home from after serving 30 years. I gave all my time back. I was serving a double life plus 140 years sentence. So that's the questions.
Okay, I mean, before we get into that, we're gonna go before what got you sentenced. They got you to 30 years, so we're gonna talk about that before you went to prison. Then we're gonna talk about some of the prison stories that happened while you was in prison, and then we get to like how life been since you came home out of prison after serving 30 years.
Okay.
So wherever you want to start at, like wherever you start at, from your teenage years coming up in the streets of Baltimore City. Where you from, what side of town you was from and stuff. What led up to getting you to 30 years.
Okay. Great. So first and foremost, my parents died when I was 13 years old. Our family, more so, they abandoned me. And so I was really raised by the streets. A lot of cats say today that they got it out the mud or they 10 toes down in the streets. I was really in the streets at 13 years old, right? Fending for myself with no assistance from anybody. I ran into a cat, which I will only call him Black, that taught me how to be who I was, and in some cases, who I still am. The cat Black taught me how to eat, and his way of teaching me how to eat was in turning me into a hitman. He had a lot of connects in his town. And when he used to get contracts, he would have me out there doing them. Because he was showing me a new life. A life where I could eat. Literally, I could eat. He showed me that the gun was the most important thing in my life. It was more important than him, more important than any woman that I had, and in most cases more important than God. And I was really consumed by this ideology of his. I remember, because he took me in, and I remember the first time he gave me my own gun. And I was so proud of this gun. Every day I would shine it up, right? And it was so important to me. Then one day we were sitting at a kitchen table and he took the gun apart and said, he said, you don't deserve that gun until you can put it back together. At the time I didn't know anything about putting a gun together. It was a 9mm Beretta 16 shot, I'll never forget it. And that gun sat on the kitchen table almost a week, and I used to be frustrated that I didn't know how to put that gun back together. But it meant so much to me and his ideology of the importance that the gun should have to me that I learned to sit down there and figure out how to put the gun back together. And another valuable lesson that he taught me, to never let another man touch your gun. Right? He said that you would be better off letting a man touch your woman before he touch your gun. He said because a woman will fail you, a woman will leave you. Your homeboy will fail you, he will leave you. He said, man, but the only thing should part you and your gun is death. And that was the ideology that I was raised on.
So for the people that don't know Nitty, explain more to them what your job was for the hitman and little, not too much detail, but a little detail for the folks that in the back seat that don't know what's going on with that.
Well, I've never been less than a number 2 man in any organization that I was a part of. I was either underboss or the top enforcer. And I always coached and taught all the rest of the enforcers. So that was my job. I didn't have jobs as bodyguards for dudes that was getting a lot of money in the streets. I've also been hitmen for them.
What was your sentence when you went to prison?
I received a double life plus 141-year sentence for several murders. And at first, the correct sentence, this pronunciation is a double life, a double natural life plus 141-year sentence. They wanted to try me under the death penalty. It was actually kind of a beef between the feds and Baltimore homicide when they first locked me up, because the feds wanted to take jurisdiction over me and charge me under the Federal Serial Killer Act. However, because murder in and of itself wasn't a federal crime unless it was a signature, then I was eventually released to the state, because when they came to get me with both the feds and homicide and the Baltimore City Police, it came when they came to raid my house. So when I went to court, the state made a motion to try me under the death penalty. And I never forget what the judge said when he denied the state's motion. He said that he was going to deny because I was still young yet. And the reason why that statement meant so much to me is that he didn't even want to grant me a quick death. Something that I unfortunately granted all of my victims. So next question.
So when you say the feds try to give you the serial killer, that's because there was several murders?
Yeah, because in the federal statute, any 3 murders or more of the same similarity, which they call a signature, you are considered as a serial killer.
Right. Then when the state took over, so that's how you got you. The state took over and they gave you the time that you received.
They gave me the time that I received. All my trials lasted maybe about a month and 3 weeks. Cause I kept on going to court back to back to back to back. I just had different juries. And one of the reasons that I got out was because, and it's a term that I read in a case that the Special Court of Appeals used. They said they warned judges for trying to put so many nails in the coffin of a defendant that they end up splitting the wood and giving the defendant the opportunity to give his time back. Now, in some cases, I was straight framed, where they had crackheads, dope fiends coming to court lying to say that they knew me, and that even one particular girl actually said that she knew me because I used to be over her house every week and I always had my shirt off, to indicate that me and her might have been messing around. A complete and absolute lie. But they put these type of people on a witness stand because the police had what street niggas call by any means necessary mentality for certain dudes. In the early 90s, even the late part of the 80s, but definitely from 90 on to about 96, law enforcement took that approach by any means necessary, where if you had any sort of name, they was lock you up, and if they had to frame you to convict you, then that's what they was willing to do. Many states' attorneys like Mark Cohen and Patricia Jessamy was a part of this. And even now, this had become the status quo so much in the Baltimore justice system that they actually put one of their own, they actually turned on one of their own because she wasn't locking up enough niggas. She wasn't feeding the beast, right? Who so many investors they have in prison systems. You have some of the biggest companies use prison systems to build their products because at best a guy's getting 95 cents a day. And these are big companies, from perfume to all kind of electronic companies, and they paying these people 95 cents a day when they're getting biggins off these products.
You talking about that's why in prison, right?
That's why in prison.
Okay.
Okay. Now, taking it back a little bit, the things that led me up to prison. What I believe in, and because many people have said it, one of the things that I believe that would be the most famous and memorable one is that a murder that I caught at a funeral of the person that I had already caught, that I had already killed. Meaning the person whose funeral it was, I killed him as well as another guy that attended the funeral.
Okay.
That's probably one of the ones that people would say that was the most famous, and it would seem strange coming from a now retired blood, but this ideology came to me from many of the things that I had read about Raymond Washington, one of the most famous Crips that ever wore a blue flag, because Raymond Washington believed in killing someone twice. And that's the kind of hatred that I knew that I had to embrace in this game. I remember at 14, one of the most hardest and horrifying lessons that I ever learned, because I hung with a lot of older guys, like much older than me, and I learned the code of you don't mess with another man's woman that's inside your circle, right? That was a cardinal rule, one that many have abandoned now, and the females, they don't care about it because it was never a rule of theirs. So I remember we went out shopping, we went out to eat, and man, we was hollering at girls all day and all this. And so when we got back in the car, the dude that was beside me, because I was in the back as well, I never forget that while we was riding, all this stuff was going on, but I didn't realize it, and I learned the importance of what people say: be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what's going on. Because when I replayed it in my mind, I watched this whole setup, develop. I watched when they went to back then it was Kmart. I was when they get the gas cans. I watched when we went to the gas station to put the gas in the car. So fast forward back to what I was saying, the story I was telling. It was that when we was riding, I didn't even realize that we wasn't in the normal car. So when we was riding and we was coming across this big parking lot, and I won't name the place, anything like that, and they was turning the music up. And as we was riding, just out of nowhere, one of my mentors and big homeboys back then turned around and blew this guy's head off beside me. And it was to the point that the whole back window shield, I can remember like it was yesterday, was blood. And his body had kind of lifted off the seat. And it was white smoke in there. You see like little particles in the air. And they kept on driving. And I never forget that he turned around and offered me a stick of chewing gum. And I said, nah, I'm okay. And so they kept on talking, him and the driver, like this was something they do as normal as putting on their shoes every morning. And so when we got out, I was so scared to get out, and this was what let me know whether or not I was really built for this game. Because at first I said, damn, I miss my mother. And amidst all this. But then I said, boy, this is something that you went in with eyes open. So when the car stopped, I never forget it was a Monte Carlo. He lifted up the back seat, and I stuck my head out first because I said if it happened, I don't want to see it coming. Right? So me and him got to walking, and while the driver was gasoline in the car, and I never forget, he asked me a question. He said, I guess you wonder why I did that. And I said, nah. He said, you're a liar. Yes, you are. He said, I did that. He said, because this motherfucker waited, and I won't say the other person's name, until he went to the penitentiary to crack on his wife. He said, a motherfucker like that is a snake. He said, and because snakes have been the enemy since the beginning of time, you kill snakes. And that was a valuable lesson that I learned. And then, because I hear a lot of these cats, they brag on how they snake their man. I used to be, now I'm going to take you in a joint, and I'll take you back to the beginning of the joint in a minute, when I first got in the penitentiary. But I used to hear guys brag about them being niggas who trunk niggas. They bag snatchers and all this other shit. And I end up always having to ask myself, when they get pretty much halfway through the story, I guess, I say, that was your man. And their justification was, I really didn't fuck with this nigga. They tried to keep their conscience at bay. And it's like niggas like that are snakes. They can't be trusted. One of my old partners told me a lesson about women one time. He said, man, if you see a nigga that's overly in love with his woman, he's head over heels or in love with his woman, he said, don't fuck with him. don't do business with him, none of that. He said because if a nigga is like that about that bitch, he would do anything to stay out there with her. And I say, damn. And then he showed me facts. What's the dude come out of New York? Nicky Barnes. And Nicky Barnes was a part of the syndicate. But yet, and he did not tell at first until other members of the syndicate broke the cardinal rule and was fucking his wife. Now, was it okay for him to still tell? Hell no. A rat is a fucking rat. And I don't condone it in any shape, form, or fashion. But what's missing from the game these days to me is that it has become anarchy. It's no rules. Like, and niggas try to live by made up rules. When I say that is, when I say made up rules, I mean it in the sense of you're trying to find a justification to the bullshit you did. And I always tell niggas, be yourself. I said, I remember as a kid, I used to watch this little show, used to come on in the cartoons, and they had a guy by the name of Captain Chesapeake. And one of the things he used to always say, at the end, he said, remember kids, he said, always remember to be somebody important. Be yourself. That lesson sticks to me to this day. And it should apply to the game. Because you got guys who will sit down there and be pretenders to the game and knowing that's not really them. But because their man is doing it and they are having fun with their man, they said, well, shit, man, I might as well go ahead and play that role too. But sadly to say, in most of them cases, they the first one to get killed. So let's go back to the penitentiary when I first got in there. It just seemed like this was just, it reminded me of a machine. I went in the penitentiary, I just turned 22. And it was enormous to me. Never forget it. And this was actually my second incarceration. But when I went in there, I looked up these tiers and I seen all 5 of these tiers stacked on top of each other. Man, it said it had to be about a block long. And I went on the 3rd tier. I never forget it. My first cell was A block, 333. And it was in these little, man, it was so small in there that, and I'm not a big guy, and I could just scrape both sides of the wall with my fingertips. And this was someplace that 2 men supposed to share. You had to have your clothes in there, your food, and your appliances and all this stuff.
That's the penitentiary downtown, right?
Yes, that's the penitentiary. You didn't even have a window in your cell. That's how it was. Your only way that you seen any sense of civilization is through the windows, these big windows that you couldn't reach. You had to be up on one of the tiers to look out there on the street in what they used to call street side. It used to be B block. You used to call it street side. That's also where Death Row was at. And I got a funny story about that. I went on lockup for beating this cat up. And the reason why I beat him up, because everybody was saying, man, that's that little kid Frank Nitty, man. That's that little kid Frank Nitty. Man, Shorty ain't, boy, he don't play with that motherfucking gun, boy, he don't play. And the nigga, I still remember his name was Feli. And he said, yeah, well, that nigga ain't got that 45 in here. Right? And so I asked myself, buddy, I said, man, you know who that was? He said, man, sound like little dude named Fila always be running his mouth. I said, well, when we come out for the yard in the morning, point him out, right? And so I walked into the dude, he pointed him out, I walked into I said, you feel out? He said, yeah, I banged him in his mouth. Right?
Right.
Because I want you to know that I'm the same nigga in the penitentiary as I am in the streets. You know, as Cap Gates would like to say, back then I was really retarded. You know what I mean? You had to show me, you know what I mean, that I wasn't who the fuck I thought I was. Right? So, I remember one of the first things, my buddies, because I grew up seeing a lot of these legends that came from out of Park Heights that was in the penitentiary now. And where people haven't seen them in years. And it was like, to me, it was like I was seeing celebrities. Right? Because I'm like, wow, man, that's such and such and such and such. I've been from a little kid. And you had a bunch of dudes, they were trying to bring me food and, you know, and cigarettes and all that. I said, man, look, I appreciate all that. I need a knife. They say, why, Lord? I say, because nigga, we in the penitentiary. I say, man, I can't get my gun in here. I like to, but I can't. I said, so I got to go to the guns in here. Now forget it. My man, Unky, came out the motherfucker, man, later on that night, bought me a knife. Boy, there you go. Said, appreciate you. Because none of the rest of that shit mattered. The clothes, the cigarettes, the commissary and all that shit, that's important to a nigga ain't got nothing going on in the penitentiary, right? But I knew that my personality and my ego, I was gonna run into a few bumps in the road. I said, so I knew I had to keep that mind state. So I got to the stage of I'm using the phone and everything, and back then it was a lot more anarchy than it is now, because niggas believe that back then when you come in there, the only two things you should be on the phone about is getting some drugs in there or talking to your lawyer about getting out of prison. They said, a lot of niggas say, man, they didn't respect the fact of boy, you love your girl. You know, you want to be in touch with her. You know, you want to hear her voice. Niggas didn't respect that back then. And if you wanted to be a nigga who done that, then you had to represent that. And I remember my second encounter, a nigga pulled me up out the phone, and I was talking to my son's mother, and I told her to hold on. And I turned around and banged him in his mouth. This man pulled me up on his phone no more. Now, what's up?
Your organization you belong to, you say Blood Nitty?
Yes.
What's that?
Rolling 20s. Eastside Dove.
Alright, YouTube, thanks for watching. We're going to hold the video for now until part two. Part two coming soon. Stay alert. Peace out. Remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.